lot since kind of been on it. I was watching other Talking in Stations, and there was some discussion about how it's transformed over the years.
Yeah, they've changed basically every facet of it. It's probably for the better, but
Yeah, I think that was the overall take that I got from that episode.
All right, one moment, guys. Okay, beautiful. All right, Elise, we are welcoming us into the stream. Can you give us a little bit of background on who you are?
yeah, absolutely. So I'm a predominantly Eve Online player. I just started Echoes. I didn't play in the beta or anything. But in Eve, I played. I've been playing for the last 16 years 16 years or so, which is kind of weird to say out loud. I've been a FC in an LSAT group called Pandemic Legion, which I also then ran for some time. I ran that alliance for about 4 or 5 years, and passed it off to Headliner, who's doing it now. I was also on the Player Council, which is the Council of Stellar Management for CSM 6 and 7, so that's about 8 years ago or so. And I've also done some work with CCP with their Alliance tournament. I put on the last one, the group I work with put on the last one from a production standpoint. And I've also competed, and I've done some commentary and shoutcasting for it. So if you've consumed any Eve media from the CCV channels, you've probably seen my face or heard my voice in some way or another. But I'm fresh in Echoes, and I'm really loving the atmosphere.
So you definitely live, breathe, and eat and sleep Eve, and now you're
unfortunately so, yeah.
Hey, it's a lifestyle, right? It's a very interesting game, and it's kind of cool to see people try out both sides. NavyMan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I don't have quite 16 years into the game. I started first playing in 2016, but it was more of a, oh, look, spaceships game thing. Picked it up, dropped it. I was a victim of the learning curve for that first time. In 2008, I had much more time to kind of really digest it, and got really focused in the industry and like intelligence gathering. It kind of just worked with my schedule and things. A big part of that was like POS smashing. We would have we'd get a group of people together after we determined that a POS was unowned, smash the tower, steal all the loot around it. It actually made us almost a trillionist with blueprints at one point. We just got really lucky from the labs. And then, I fluctuated in and out of it. I've done incursions. I did FC incursions for a while as a different character. And then in 2017, I got really heavy into the news side of EVE Online, wanting more of my friends to really understand what was going on, why there were so many passionate people about spaceships, right, in this far off universe, and worked really hard to kind of get more news coverage. I worked with the Inn at that time. I think it was the Matini, and then Eve News 24, which is still the same, and just really tried to get more people that were outside of it, instead of Kotaku covering one battle, covering the day in the life of a miner and things like just a wormhole space and why it was so crazy to be there and things. And I really latched more on the development side of things when, CCP got more into the APIs and making them better. That's really where I kind of stayed. Even if I left the game, I would still maintain tools for groups.
Now, that's actually one interesting point I wanted to highlight, because a lot of people know that I kind of came in ferociously into the EVE Echoes community. But NavyMan, you were actually one of the first people I met from EVE Online. And in fact, I had gotten set up with EVE News 24. So not a lot of people know this. This was way back when I was going on about how I think mobile games would be kind of a thing. And now you've been kind of developing some tools. You stopped playing EVE Online for a while, is that correct?
Yeah, real life kind of took over. I ended up transitioning jobs and having to do more at work stuff, mentorship and things. And I was always one of those content creator kind of people where groups of people would rely on me. And if I couldn't give 8 or 9 hours in a 2 or 3 day span to figure out, hey, what are we going to do next? That pressure kind of just built up and said, hey, I don't want to keep creating content right now. I'd rather provide tools for other people to create the content.
So tell us a little bit about the tools that you're going to be building in terms of news, because you're building an app on Android, is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually my third Eve Android app. I have one before that. It's about 2.5 years old. A lot of miners, solo miners, use it to kind of time how they're like for big orcas and stuff. Like they're sending their drones out. They say, "Oh man, I have 3 hours to fill the cargo hold, right?" Like, but I want to know when it's going to happen. So it's less AFK for them because they can put random timers in and stuff. And then I've been talking to a couple news sources and saying, "Hey, you're really missing the mobile market, right?" And that's my day job. And they were always like, "Nah, we don't want to get in the mobile market." Like I've been talking about it for like 2 years, and finally one weekend my wife was like, "Just do it, just make it, just see what happens." So said, "Okay, fine, why not?" Challenge accepted. Got on Twitch and sat there and streamed 8 hours of building it, and people were just like, "Wait, are you gonna make an Echoes version of this?" I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean gonna make an Echoes version? And someone linked a tweet. I went there. I was like, I'm getting back in this because I played the beta and it was awesome where you could just pick it up and put it down. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna scrap that other app. I'm just gonna make all news for Eve Echoes. And people were like, well, we don't want just news. We want other things. Like, well, that takes more time. So
I mean, you have the app up, right? Do you want us to pop it up and we can kind of go through some of the features that it has so far?
Yeah, no problem. Here we go. Is this? I want to make sure you're seeing it right because on my screen it's backwards, so I hope it looks correct.
Let's double check.
It's forwards for us.
Yeah, it's forwards for us.
Okay, cool. So when you first open the app, you're in the news feed, right? Which is kind of, you want the daily digestion of what's going on and what things that you need to know about now. Like we did a PSA about, hey, resistance modules aren't working. So if you're spending millions of ISK on these faction ones, they're really not doing anything good for you. So luckily that was fixed in a recent patch. But on top of that, like you could say, hey, I want to come back to this YouTube article, or I want to see this one again for missiles. You can switch to just your bookmarked articles, standard kind of news stuff. But beyond that, I've started adding things like reminders. And in here are my characters. And like, oh, wow, I want to put my skill queue up so I remember to go check it, because some people are power players, so they may have multiple accounts. Looking at you, Fish. So I wanted to design it so people could use all three characters and maybe multiple accounts. And so this thing sets up a 23-hour reminder automatically, and I have like an issue out to make it dynamic where you can do it yourself. But you can also do it for your planets. And so it says, hey, 23 hours, it's going to ring you. And this is in developer mode, so in 30 seconds it'll pop a notification up. So we can leave here.
That is so cool. You can get reminders of when things are ready to be picked up. What about, like, for example, when you place down a structure and it's vulnerable? Are you going to be able to set timers for those as well?
So actually, that's a great point. I haven't written up the issue, but I just finished Captain Benzing's video on when he did it at the end of the beta. And I was like, that's another awesome thing to put up, right? And it'll be really heavily used. So the cool thing is I try to design tools that aren't quite future-proof, but are very flexible. So when people write in an issue, bam, 20 minutes, an hour, the feature's in, ready to go, goes to beta.
That is so cool.
You gave me an amazing link for ZGod's spreadsheet, and so this isn't even in beta yet. This is alpha. I'm starting to do like anomaly sizes and levels, so you'll be able to select, hey, it's an Inquisitor. I didn't put bases in here for a specific reason. There'll be a whole little thing on that, because I want to make a warning. I know Elise wants to cover some of that. But what will happen is you'll be able to select your different levels, and it'll tell you all the waves. And then you'll be able to check each wave off, so you won't have it on the screen. And then on top of that, this will be picture-in-picture, so you'll be able to see it while you're playing Eve Echoes is the idea. I haven't finished all the prototyping yet for it.
Now, I mean, I'm a Winmatar, so I mean, I'm all for the background. Is that background customizable for any of the Amarian scum who might like to be interested in using the app?
Yes, so it defaults to Amar when it starts out, because there is only one god kind of thing for the thing. But yeah, there's a lot of people. One of my top comments is Caldari Master Race, and there's screenshots of this everywhere. But I put all four in here. Eve Echoes provided them for one of their Innery things and said, hey, developers, use this as much as possible. It's like, those things look like an amazing background. So
Those
put
are
'em in
really
here.
cool. Now, Elise,
But yeah,
what would be a suggestion for any kind of features that you would use on something like this? Or have you seen any tools like this being built already?
So I've seen it a little bit. I kind of browse the Echo subreddit, so I kind of see glimpses of stuff. But there's so much information that just comes naturally to an Eve player that an Echoes player like might not know, like the damage type that your guns do, the damage type that NPCs do, the damage type that like they deal, how stacking works and stuff like that. Eve players just have that as second nature because the core mechanics have been unchanged for almost 2 decades, right? So coming into Echoes, it feels like I had like this weird unfair advantage. Like, oh, Serpentis rats, I know that they're going to deal thermal and kinetic, and I have to deal thermal and kinetic to them, so I can do those anomalies and missions much faster. So stuff like that, just stuff that Eve players kind of take for granted, and how you can reprocess modules and get minerals out of them. I think there's a lot of Echoes players that don't quite realize that either.
100%.
unless you misstep and hit that button.
So
I had a friend that was on Discord and he just started screaming. We're like, what's going on? It's like, I just reprocessed an entire hangar of modules. What?
No! Jeez, what did he lose?
A ton of like Mark V and Mark 7s. Luckily, all the faction stuff doesn't use the auto reprocessor. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can't reprocess faction mods, which is weird. But you did remind me of one thing that I would love to see, and I'm not sure if you actually have it yet. But that's an Eve map. So Eve players, they don't really use the in-game map all that often. They use a third party called Dotlan. So it's dotlan.net/Eve maps or something. So it's a really nice visual representation of how the universe is laid out. And the star map in Echoes is so weird. Like, I can't tell what's where just because of how it's laid out. And there's no information on it. I don't know what the constellations even mean.
Oh,
So that's definitely one of the things I'd love to see.
yeah, being able to kind of see very clearly where there's different factions, I would say, as a new Echoes player, I'm kind of like, I think it's around here. But yeah, it's definitely been a little bit of navigating. But NavyMan, kind of elaborate or go show us a few more of the features of the app in terms of ways that it could help players. And I see that we have a new Eden high-sec subway map popping up.
Yeah, so I'm actually in talks with a very creative artist that kind of did a subway render of all of New Eden. And he did like a low sec one and a high sec one, and he's working on a null sec one right now. And he gave me the SVG for the low sec one, and what we're doing is we're mapping out the coordinates for each of the stops. So you can say, hey, I'm in Amamaki. Where am I now, right? And it'll show you highlighted, and because it's an SVG, it'll scale, right? I love these ideas, and some of them were already in the thought process, but don't stop throwing them out there, right? Because the more I hear one, I can shift priorities and say, this has got to be the thing that's got to be next. So, but I'm glad you said something about the map, because it's definitely something I want. And this isn't as amazing as Dotland, but it's very visual.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. I mean, I'm still stoked on the reminder thing because as someone who plays a few different accounts, being able to have a little notification that pops up and saying, you know, you need to refresh or collect your planetary interaction would be awesome. And then in terms of mining, do you have any features where someone could essentially say, okay, I want to build this ship. Where will I, what kind of minerals do I need to gather? And then how long is it going to take as an estimation for me to build this ship?
So that is something where it's on the roadmap and it's pretty high up there. One of the things that I started with was just, hey, you know, put in all the different types, you know, because I played Eve and I know them all because I've been in industry so long. But sometimes you're like, oh man, I'm 3,000 Noxium from building that, you know, Venture 3. What do I need to mine? Oh, I need to mine Pyroxy. Oh, geez. Okay, I got to go find like a true, like if you're in high sec, you got to find a low true sec 0.5, right, that has level 4 belts. So you can find one roid of it. And that's something that's kind of in here. I'm going to eventually have it where you can click these and it'll just sort so you can only show them, and then have a menu down here where it'll say, hey, this is 33% of titanium or trit, and then this is Mexlon. But one of the things I want to do on top of that is say, hey, I want to build a Venture 3, right, and have all the list of stuff. And ZGod has a really good spreadsheet for it. Unfortunately, it's about getting that data in there. And then you'll be able to hit a button that says, hey, what do I need to mine? And I'm going to be in high sec. So, okay, I know I can only mine the top 3, right, or top 4 reliably. But then it'll say, like, oh, you need 5,600 units of it, okay? And this will list out all the trit. And then it'll say, hey, you need a scordite of like 8,000 units, right? And be able to break them all down and give you like a shopping list, basically. So you can either go mine it and have your reprocessing skills set up correctly, or just go buy those components, right? And the balance between it. Now, this scale goes all the way up to 100%, but I don't even think with skills you can go there. But it's kind of an intermediary piece for it.
Yeah, well, this is really cool. I think there's a lot of additional tools and features that can be added. Would you say, so the majority of the app so far has a lot of news features in there. What would be the next big features that you're going to be focusing on in the near future, in the next like upcoming month?
Ship fitting is huge, and more of like an industrial calculator. Those are, I'm trying to find the things that make the app a daily driver for people, right? And that really comes down into it, like, hey, I want to get out of Venture Trainer. I want to get into a Venture 2. What do I need to do, right? Hey, I want to be able to do like the T5 missions reliably, almost AFK. Like, what ship do I need to get into? And kind of have some of these videos that I watch every single one of them, and I download their CCC, which is their closed captioning, to try to figure out, hey, what ships are they using to do this, and how difficult is that, so that I can kind of give people recommendations, or say, hey, you know, Sovereign RPG says this is the way to do it. Go watch his video, right?
Awesome.
But those would be the two big things.
I was going to say Sovereign RPG is actually here watching, so I think he said hello. Definitely maybe can connect you guys to get some more of the news on your app, and make sure that as many people can see all this great news that's out there. And definitely giving out a shout out to ZGod. ZGod, if you are watching this, would love you to connect with NavyMan so that maybe he can have some access to the spreadsheet information, and we can add some more robust features in this tool. I think that would be really, really cool to be able to collaborate. In terms of ship fittings, Elise, did you want to kind of give any feedback for people who I've just been seeing a lot of streams out there that are this ship or that ship? What should I choose? Do you, as a Eve vet, what would be your advice to people in terms of this?
So the neat thing about Eve is obviously it's a super dense game. So having like a helper app has always been like a requirement for the Eve universe. But in Eve, there's pretty much 100 ways that you can do about any given task. So every race, every ship can have a chance at doing an objective. Sometimes there are more efficient ways. I see so many people in these Navy caracols and just caracols in general, and they're like, oh, this is the best way. Missiles always hit, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way you should play, or that's even the most effective way to play. So when it comes to fitting, instead of having just like, oh, I have to fit this in this slot, this in that slot, ta-da, it should be more about like, you should ask yourself, what am I going to do like immediately? What do I need to have my ship fit for? And for doing stuff like storylines and stuff like that, you'll want to, and this is a very broad brush, right? You want to minimize your tank that you can survive with. Like obviously you want to survive, but you want to have the least amount of tank possible to survive and the most amount of damage, so you can clear those missions as fast as possible. I think a lot of people don't really appreciate the effectiveness of speed of your personal ship and how the damage formula works. So kind of one of the best ways to tank is to go real fast, or at least to afterburn in a certain direction. It's kind of broadside to your target, so you can deal the most damage and you can keep range and kite. So far, you know, since everyone's stuck at cruiser level right now, and everyone wants to kind of hit above the belt a little bit. That's been my the best way I've been able to do a lot of these missions and a lot of these NPC things.
Have you seen any of the videos where they're like, "Oh, you don't need to move. This fitting will allow you just to warp in at 0 and just chill there, kill the rats." I'm like, "What are you doing?" Like, the Eve part of me is going, "No. The reason why you have an afterburner is so you take less damage, right?
Yeah,
so that means you can do more damage because your more lows are available."
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, you're technically correct that you could do that, but you're just wasting a lot of potential in your ship. And that's kind of the fun part about Eve too. It's not necessarily just grabbing a fit off the internet or from a resource and throwing it on your ship. It's kind of figuring it out, what works for you and what works for your style. Some people like sitting at range and just lobbing missiles. Some people like getting real close and going so fast that the NPCs can't track you, but you're using these snub nose guns and doing like giga damage. Like some people love that effect. Other people will just take a frigate. They like taking the Condor too, and the NPCs have such bad tracking that they can't hit you.
100%. I think that might be one thing to highlight too for a lot of new players. Just not being able to take for granted that new players really are jumping in. There's so much to think about in terms of modules. You have your high slots, low slots, mid slots, and then you've got rigs. There's just a lot to digest. But there is a big distinct difference between a PvE fit and a PvP fit. And being able to understand, a few great how to swap out the two, I think would be very helpful. And even for your tool, NavyMan, being able to show suggested maybe PvP fits or suggested PvE fits would be really cool.
I watched one of your episodes recently, and they were talking about the PvP bait venture. And I was rolling so hard because that was one of the first things we did in Wormholes. It was like, yep, just got a venture here, just minding my own business, sucking up some gas, don't worry about me. And it was always the bait ship, right? Like, you had the best, tankiest skills, you had the drones, you had 2 scrams, you're just ready to lock them down. And then everyone just, the stealth bombers either bomb the target or, a whole bunch of different tactics. So I really kind of like that a new generation of people are discovering Eve, and they want, deep tools. And it just takes time to kind of develop it. But I want to share the app real quick, if you don't mind, because I want to capitalize on Elise's point. Look at this, T7 anomaly and a cheap T4 frigate, right? If you haven't watched this video, this is hilarious. And then even more down here, this is another one I just found last night. And he talks about the solo level 8 stories, right? Business magnet, and having 2 different fits, right? And why that's important. And so that really goes to Elise's status of, hey, it's not always going to be one size fits all. And as we grow in tech levels, there's going to be new ways to do things. I bet someone's already working on some T3 variant of doing a T6 mission or T7, right? And that's the power of Eve. And that's why I always keep coming back, because people are they're always crazy crafting stuff. The meta's never the same because people are like, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How do I counter that? And as long as the devs stay active, which I find are amazing. That's really why I'm so passionate about Eve Echoes and creating tools for it, because they're transparent. If you're not on their Discord and getting hit with their announcements all the time, like when we had that really bad down day, they were kept posting. They're like, guys, we know we're having a bad time, right? I was gonna caught myself there. We're having a bad day, right? But we're telling you guys, we're gonna make it up to you. Don't worry. So.
I definitely think that's very responsive, and it's very unusual for a mobile gaming company. It's not something a lot of mobile gamers are used to. It's like, what's going on? These people are so involved.
I had a really good laugh
because my wallet.
Exactly.
One of the interesting, funny moments I had with Echoes is there was that they did the patch and the game was down for most of the day, right? And as NavyMan was saying, the devs posted updates. They said, hey, we know that this is annoying for you. We're going to reward you with skill points. Don't worry about it. It brought me back to a moment in Eve where a similar thing happened. They did a patch and they accidentally removed the boot.ini file for your computer instead of the game. So if you patched Eve and then restarted your computer, it was dead. You had to reinstall Windows. And they didn't catch this until it was 4 or 5 hours into the day. And so oh shit. And instead of saying like, "Hey guys, sorry about that," they kind of joked about it and made like in-game items to kind of poke fun
Yeah,
at the thing they did, and even made like a little video for it. So it's fun to see how games have kind of progressed and how the Echoes guys kind of take the game.
Now, one thing that Sovereign RPG mentioned is that he's seen a lot of people fitting their ships with both shield and armor tanks. Can we explain why that is not a good idea?
For
unless
sure.
you're
So
tight.
so Eve Online is all about min maxing like your best attributes, right? So if you do shield and armor, you're going to do them both, but you're going to do them both poorly. You're better suited to doing armor or shield, depending on the ship you're flying, and depending on the people you're facing, and then boosting your resist too. Instead of spending those extra slots on just throwing an extra shield booster on, you can actually just beef up your ship. You can plate it if you're an armor ship. You can increase the resists. You can throw on some platings and stuff like that. The same happens with guns too. People, and I think this is probably like a World of Warships type mentality. People fit different types of guns in their high slots because they're like, oh, if someone's close, I'm going to need the small gun. If someone's far, I'm going to need the large gun. No, no, no. You want to have the same range for your guns because a lot of it is like the way you position your ship. You want to be able to sit in an optimal range and deal the damage that you do, and you want to be able to have that cohesiveness. So instead of having 100 DPS mixed between two guns, that way you're always doing 50 DPS. That sucks. You want to be able to focus in one thing. And that's the same mentality when it comes to deciding between shield and armor.
And I think too, you just touched on they might see a certain DPS and they might see a certain range. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed that once you're out there, it's a lot of it is in fact how you position your ship. Just it can show you the potential, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily what you're going to yield if you don't place yourself
exactly.
in the right area.
And I would have to say this, like another point in the Eve Echoes developers, they actually realized some of what we're talking about because they've been watching some of the videos, and they actually put out on the Echoes Facebook a video that says, hey, here's your actual maximum range, here's your recommended range, and here's the formula. Try to, like, but they I don't know if they were making fun of each other, but they had 3 different guns on the ship. And I'm like, what? Why are you teaching them this?
It'll definitely be good in terms of on the tool if people can bookmark their favorited content creators, because I do think we have a lot of newer players coming in and they're also kind of discovering it, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. That's kind of one of the reasons I think leaning a little bit into the Eve vets of the community who are open to sharing some of this feedback is really good. Because then you can avoid making some of these mistakes. I mean, no one wants to be building an incredible ship only to just lose it because they didn't fit it properly. So, Elise, tell us, is there any kind of fun stories that you've experienced in Eve Echoes so far?
So there have been quite a few, right? I've seen some interesting fits. I've seen some Eve players come into Echoes and think they know the whole everything. They're like, oh, I know how this works. I'm going to be the best of the best. And they'll just die instantly, right? Because the game, it's very similar, right? There are a lot of similarities. The core principles of Echoes are borrowed from EVE Online. So the tracking formulas, how all that stuff works is all from EVE. But there are some differences. Like the slot layouts of the ships are completely different. The fact that you can basically fit any gun to any ship without like skilling too much. Is very different. So they think like, oh, I'm a pro. So I watched a guy in a Caracol go out and he fit mediums because he was like, oh, rapid lights are bad in Eve because of the reload time. So I don't want them. So I'm just going to fit mediums, which are like heavy missiles. And he goes out and he gets caught by 2 condors. And essentially they just go in and out of his range and they speed tank him and he can't do anything about it. And then people see his lost mail. And they're like, why didn't you just fit rapid lights? Why didn't you fit a web or anything like that? He's like, oh, no, they're bad in Eve for killing NPCs. And I was there to kill NPCs, so I didn't want to use them. So it's always fun to see. And then I see an Echoes guy come out with a shield tanked Caracol Navy issue, which is normal. But he's using lasers because he's fighting Blood Raiders, right? And their weakest resistance is EM and thermal. So you see this laser caracol just flying out in space, which is an abomination to an Eve player. They wouldn't even consider that like possible. They'd be like, "That's just giga trash." And here he is, like doing loops around these other guys, just because he figured out like, "Hey, this works." So I'm not going to be burdened by what works in another game.
Yeah, exactly. I had a friend that he just grind and grind and grind and got a Navy issue Caracal, and he did the math because he was helping me for some data points in one of my other apps, and he goes, armor wrapping is just so much better. Like, and this was before the patch for the resistances. And he goes, huh? So he made this entire armor tanked Navy Caracal, and how it was all set up. He was just going in doing T7s. He could almost AFK. He was like, meh, whatever. And then he started doing storylines. He's like, man, the cash is just coming in. Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm like, what do you mean you broke the game? That's what you did, you know? And he's like, I would never fly this in Eve. Like, I feel bad, like, sending you a screenshot of this armored tanked, like, Caldari ship. He's like, but it works. And it works so well.
Yeah, the slot layouts are so different in Eve, right? So in Eve, the low slots are armor and damage, and that's it. And the mid slots are shield and like utility with like webs and stuff, and that's it. So like just the concept just wouldn't occur to a lot of these people. Like, hey, I have to fit a shield rep to a Caldari ship because they usually get mid slots.
And I think too, there was just one point you touched on in terms of being open to trying new things. Like, you know, that we're pioneering this game. We're learning a lot of the features. We're learning some of the nuances. So being open to trying things. Our team shoots each other to kind of figure out the strength of the ship, figure out optimal fits. But we kind of are open to trying those new things as well as applying some of the things that we've learned. So it's a kind of striking a fine balance. I think moving away from should I fly a Stabber or should I fly a Caracal, it's really about what is the ship going to do? What are you going to do in that ship before you actually choose it?
Yeah, and that's where you get the real advantage, because that's where it comes. That's where the Eve part takes over. Not necessarily exactly the fit, but how you fly it and what you're going to do with it.
Now, would you be able to tell us the difference between micro warp drives and afterburners?
Yeah, so that's a pretty cool one that Eve Online kind of has ingrained into people. So an afterburner will increase your speed, not a huge amount, but it increases it a fair amount, but it doesn't touch your signature. It also doesn't affect pretty much anything other than the velocity of your ship. So you'll just move pretty quickly, and it's good for most things. A micro warp drive, so an afterburner is more of a PvE thing, if you want to keep that mentality. A micro warp drive is when you want to go real fast. We're talking like triple the speed, sometimes even more than that compared to an afterburner. I haven't actually looked at the stats in Echoes. I assume they mirror Eve Online. But the other thing is that it increases your speed, but it also increases the signature radius of your ship, which affects how opponents can not only lock you, but track you with either missiles or guns. So the idea of increasing your speed and your signature, it means you'll be tracked the same way. So that's a big thing. It's more of a... Yeah, there's also a cap penalty, and the micro warp drive also uses way more capacitor than the afterburner. So it's not something you can keep on. You kind of want to use in spurts. It's used a lot in PvP when you want to kite, catch an enemy, kind of duck in and out of their gunfire as well. So micro warp drive, very much a PvP type of module when you kind of want to keep it that way. Obviously, there are situations where you'll want an AB in PvP and a micro warp drive in PvE. One of the neat things about Eve Echoes is just the slot layouts are so different compared to Eve, and there are so fewer of them, that signature tanking, which is what we call it in Eve, is a huge thing in Echoes, right? You can have your ship afterburning, and there aren't really any countermeasures to increase the signature of that ship. You can web that ship, but the webs only go out to 11, 13 kilometers if you've got a faction one. So signature tanking, which is where you're going real fast with a very small target, which is what you'd get at an afterburner. I think that's going to be the kind of the meta for PvP and a lot of PvE as well. in the early days of Echoes.
Now, due to the amount of capacitor it takes, would you advise people to fit one or multiple? How that we are fitting, say, the same weapon, but would you fit multiple micro warp drives on one ship?
So I don't even know if you can anymore. I think it's limited to one to be activated at any one time. So it's you just devote one slot to it. If you could do multiple, that's kind of where the game breaks. But
Yeah,
you'd only
7,000
be able to do it like
ships.
yeah, you'd only be able to do it for like 10 or 12 seconds before your cap is completely gone. But yeah, definitely just devote one of these items to your ship. And you have to be very aware. I would suggest just like floating around in space with it on because your ship handles differently, right? It increases your mass. So when you turn, it kind of turns a little bit more sluggishly. So fly around, check to see like how your capacitor works in reality. If you open up the fitting tool, and this is especially true if you have a bunch of Nosferatu's fit in your mid slots. It might say cap stable, but that's assuming that the Nos is getting a full hit off of your enemy and you're getting everything perfectly, which is very rarely the case. That could be a real big trap for you. If you say, "Oh, I'm cap stable," you go out and fight a real enemy, or you fight some in a PvP area or PvE area rather, where you're not very close to your enemy. You might go cap dry in 30 or 40 seconds and that little thing said stable and then you just sit there and die. So definitely kind of fly around and see how it works and how it actually affects you.
And
I'm actually adding that as an FAQ right now because I had totally forgot about that. But one of my friends was like, no, take off your two NOSes, make sure you're stable. I'm like, oh, I'm not stable. He goes, yeah, you got to train whatever, cruiser command skill to 5 or something to make this fit work. It's like, oh, okay. So I'm already writing that frequently asked question out right now.
Nice.
So I've also couched this in an either or situation, and that's not actually entirely accurate. There are situations where you can fit both an afterburner and a micro warp drive. You just can't activate them both at the same time. So let's say you're in a kiting ship. You enter like a Scout 6 or something, and everything's on you at 0. You could just micro warp drive away to like 40 kilometers, and then turn the micro warp drive off, and then turn on the afterburner to kind of keep that distance. So to maintain the 40 kilometers and to speed tank a little bit that way. It's also used in PvP because we talked about how SIG tanking is probably going to be the meta for quite some time, or at least in the early days until they release more modules. You can micro warp drive right up to the guy you want to kill and then orbit around him with an afterburner on. So your signature will stay small, but your velocity will stay high, which means you'll be taking very few of the actual shots.
That's good. Very good to know. I know that you can dual prop with both of them, but I don't think I've ever personally tried it. I don't know if I will. I don't know. I'm still getting used to all of the different modules, and sometimes when my boyfriend tries to explain them to me, I feel like my brain melts a little bit. And I know that a lot of EVE players are saying, "Oh, there's not as many slots," and I'm like, I think there's enough at least for me to start out with. But I think one of the other areas that would be interesting to learn a little more about is rigs. I think that's something that people don't necessarily, you start off in like frigates and whatnot, and rigs really aren't in frigates, I don't think. At least not any of the ones I saw.
If you're an Omega, you get a pre T1 rig pack.
Yes. So how would someone go about fitting their rigs, and when would it be a bad idea to fly out without rigs on the ship?
So from where I'm sitting, so rigs are just like a way to hyper specialize your ship, right? So the ship gets certain bonuses, like a Vexor will get drone bonuses. So you're going to want to fit drones to the Vexor and kind of build your ship around that. Caracal Navy's getting missile bonuses, so you would want to build your ship around that. So the rigs are if you want to just hyper specialize it even more, which is really effective in EVE. So if you've got like, if you want to call it like your daily driver, the ship that you take all the time into PvE missions, it's probably worth it to rig it out because the rigs are pretty cheap and they'll give you a pretty huge bonus. The rigs are kind of broken down into 2 categories, like combat rigs and engineering rigs. So you can do stuff like with a capacitor control circuit to increase your cap recharge rate. You can do other things. You can just increase the effectiveness of your armor rep or your shield rep. You can, and this is a big thing, increase the resistance of your armor or shield to a certain damage type. And this is massive, a massive bonus. For example, if you know that you're going to shoot a certain type of NPC, for example, if you're in a caracal and you're living in Stain, you've got 0% EM resist to your shield natively. And those rats deal 50% EM damage. So you're taking a lot of damage. You can shove 2 rigs on there. There'll be a little bit of a stacking penalty. But you can shove 2 rigs on there and you'll get almost a 60% shield resist to EM, which means you're only taking 40% of the incoming damage. There's like no other way that you can increase your tank to EM damage that effectively. And you can do the same thing for armor. And you can actually, there are also structure rigs. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. I'm going to say just avoid the structure rigs for now.
Is there any structure reppers?
There are hull reps that don't exist on the market. They only exist from drops, but they are super ineffective, and they're kind of shit, if we're being honest. Right now, there doesn't seem to be the mechanics to hull tank yet. That took EVE Online 15 years to get. And even then, it's still really niche.
Brutix and Porpoise hull tanking.
Yeah, pretty much that's it. So yeah, like the rigs are just an investment into your ship for the ship that you're going to fly quite often. And I'd say if you're going to do storylines or if you're even going to do anomalies in a safe way or encounters, definitely rig your ship. That should be the first thing you do, because they're just as important as low slots or mid slots or high slots. You don't want to leave any slot empty, because that's where you get a lot of the min-maxing.
And there is one, I think, big difference to point out about rigs versus slots, is that once you put something on the ship, if you take it off, it gets destroyed. So kind of being thoughtful before you rig the ship, and just realizing you're not going to be able to just change it out as much as you'd like. So, you know, putting a little bit of thought, I think actually putting in more thought and effort into fitting ships is what will allow players to really understand more of what they do and how that affects you. It's that kind of becomes, you have to almost sanction out a specific amount of time just to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That I it's one of those things that I take for granted with Eve. Of course, yeah, it's permanent. You can't take it off. It's not like a module. So it's definitely for when you have a ship that you say, I'm going to fly it a lot, and I'm going to fly it in this specific way. I want to rig it specifically for that. You're giving it an extra hyper focus that's very much permanent.
And it's like the difference between a Vexor trainer and a Vexor 3, like putting rigs on it, right? Like, okay, on the Vexor, the Venture 3, right, it's going to pay itself back very quickly compared to like the trainer version of it. And getting those T1 rigs are worth like the $2.5 million, because what's that one load? 2 loads a Kernite or something, or if it's Spodamane, it's even less, right? So it's like they're exponential, but not all rigs have stacking penalties, as a couple of YouTubers have shown. Some of the cargo rigs that have stacking penalties in EVE, because I think almost everything in EVE has stacking penalties, but in some of the rigs in EVE Echoes don't. I don't know if those are bugs or not, but
yeah, there are some interactions that EVE players probably wouldn't expect. So if you just slap an armor hardener on your ship, and you shove a rig on your ship, those two won't stack against each other. Obviously, you'll never get a resist above 100%, right? It's just not additive. So it's not like you're going to be immune to damage, right? So it just covers the percent that's missing. But yeah, the stacking penalties do work differently in Echoes. And we're talking a lot about combat, but this isn't only about combat stuff. You can shove rigs on your Venture as well, right? You have rigs that can increase the range of your mining laser, the yield of your mining laser, and decrease the duration of it, like how long it runs. You can, and they're like hugely significant too. So you can really increase the amount of money you're making by using these rigs. It's going to be a one-time cost, unless, of course, per ship, because your ship could die. That's kind of the goal of EVE Online, is to have your ship explode. But it's a one-time cost, but you can make it back, right? And it's one of these investments that you really should make.
I definitely had.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I definitely had that experience in the first beta. I made a retriever, and it took me so long to get all the materials to make this retriever. So I was like, I really don't want to die in this one, because I had lost my Venture in probably 5 minutes. And the biggest thing that I think helped my retriever was rigs. I think that was the big difference. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was core warp stabilizer. Basically, someone was trying to disrupt me on a gate, and I was able to get away in the nick of time, just because of using rigs. So they definitely are. I feel like for the amount of investment that you put into the ship, it's just a little bit extra to make sure that you have those rigs. That you don't want to. I consider the modules and the rigs kind of like clothing. You don't want to fly a naked ship.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about balancing risk reward, right? Like, is the rig going to be 3 million, and am I putting it on a 200,000 ship?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the disparagement in the market right now. You can buy rig blueprints, like one rig blueprint for like 2 million, and if you were to buy the same thing, it's like 4, right? But yet it's only 100,000 for the components, and then what? I think it's 8 hours of training, and yeah. Eve's always about balance, right? What are you trading to get something else? And I really like your example of that because we went the reverse way. We put damage resistance rigs on them, right? And use them as bait ships.
Ah, I see. But would you use a retriever as bait?
Hey, it was the end of the beta. What's going to happen, right?
That's true. Very true. Very true.
Elise sees it. He's smiling. He knows. Like, people are like, oh, he's going to take it out for the first time ever. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Just flying around. And really, there's like 4 or 5 guys stealthed up, ready to go.
Ah.
So
Yeah, I think the first thing I did when I got a Scrant or a Warp Disruptor at Eve, in Echoes rather, is I shoved it on a Venture and went out and I go to low sec and like another Venture next to me, like, oh, okay, this guy's a Venture, I don't have to warp off, and then I can just tackle him and kill him. It'll be real slow, but I can do it.
Now,
I love those.
I definitely think tackling is going to be one area that I would love to explore more into. Would you guys have any suggestions on a ship that is both tanky and fast?
The interceptors are pretty nice. I mean,
I'm just going to pull up the ship tree here because I kind of forget. The only one I've been using right now is the Condor 2 because that seems to be the most broken one.
Yeah.
You can sit at a pretty good range. You sit out of web range to deal your damage, which is a huge bonus, which means you can afterburn. And we're talking about you're such a small target going so fast. Missiles even have a hard time hitting you, right? There's a lot of players that don't really understand damage application and how it works in Echoes. The formula is actually incredibly complex, even for Eve players. Many of them don't understand it after 15 years. They just know what the general themes are. Small thing going fast equals hard to hit. Obviously, that's it. But
bigger explosion velocity.
Yeah, but if you tell someone, hey, should I reduce my signature by 10% or increase my speed by 10%? What's better? They won't be able to tell you off the top of their head because the formula is actually pretty hard to wrap your head around. But yeah, I really like the Condor 2 for tackling. I recently got the Algo Sniper because that whole concept of having a different mode is completely foreign to me. Well, not completely foreign. Some ships do have it.
Is it like the T3s? The T3
yeah, it's kind of like
destroyers?
the T3 destroyers in Eve. So you get like a special mode, but the Algo Sniper gets a bonus to Warp Disruptor range. So you can sit at almost 40 kilometers and hold the guy down. It feels really unfair.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to go get that now.
Brutal.
I want to try this out. I just feel so bad for like the Mimitar, man, because we don't have target painters in the game yet.
Yeah, that's why signature tanking is huge, because there's no way to inflate someone's signature. Like, it just doesn't exist in the
it's
game
like
right now.
a whole third of your bonus on some of the ships are just gone. I was so like, oh, I'm going to build a Mimitar ships. You know, I'm going to be the Rust King. I'm going to get in this. And people are like, oh, you can have this Mimitar garbage. I'm like, what? And they're just like giving me all like the broken hulls and all the stuff to build them. I'm like, why? And they go, look at the market. You can't even give these things away. Like, what do you mean? You just get some target painters and some like torpedoes? They're like, dude, target painters don't exist in the game yet. What? Why can't we have like a crappy bonus to fill in that niche until they come out?
Now, I guess that's a good point in touching on what is in the game versus what's not in the game currently that could affect things. I know Interdictors is something that is supposed to come out in Eve Echoes, but it's not out yet. What are the things you guys notice that are not in the game currently that will come out, and how might it affect playing? Because I know Interdictors might be like I think that's going to affect PvP quite a bit.
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with what's exactly in Echoes. I just have some kind of guesses. I know bubbles in general, right? So interdiction bubbles, we're talking about a ship that launches a bubble that stays in space for 2 minutes, and you cannot warp through it. If you are warping into it, you get stuck on the edge, right? So imagine this on a gate that if you want to get to, let's say you want to go to VFK, or if you want to go to Fountain, and there's some guy sitting on that first system that you have to go through that gate. He's sitting there and he puts a bubble up when you enter local. You get stuck on the outside and you probably die. There are also deployable bubbles that you can do this with, where you can just plant them on a gate and someone will get stuck into it and they're up permanently. You can kind of be clever and avoid it coming in from different angles if you know it's going to be there.
Well, you can shoot those.
Things, yeah, and you can shoot those if you want to. But those type of mechanics, I think, are going to be a pretty huge thing in Echoes when they do come in. They're going to completely change how you get into nullsec and stuff like that, because you're going to need friends to go out there, or you're going to have those friends deal with the guys that are controlling the choke points.
100%. So are you telling me that someone can just sit on a gate with an interdicted bubble, and as someone's warping through, you can blast open this bubble and trap them?
Yeah, the way
there's actually a ship called the Fly Trap, or Fly Catcher. Yeah.
That sounds really exciting.
As long as the bubble is up before you initiate the warp, then you'll get sucked onto the outside, and it's pretty far outside too. If you're sitting on the gate at 0, you're going to be 20 kilometers off. But if you're sitting with one of these interdictors at like 40 kilometers from the gate and you put a bubble up, then the guy that lands is 60 kilometers away. So he's got to go through 60 kilometers just to get through the gate, and by then you've probably killed him.
Oh no. We did have one of our viewers, Nam, mention that interdictors have been noted to come out in November, according to the developer Trello, that all the missing modules and dictors are going to be coming out in November, and then Sovereignty is going to be coming in December. So that's
going to be pretty huge.
Yes.
Yeah, I think October will be a massive wave of people that are in high sec. They're either going to decide that they're going to be staying in high sec or low sec, right? And making their movement to null sec before the bubbles go up, because that is, without T3s, right? Like, you're just cloaky interdicted. That's how we used to get to null sec all the time, and without that ability, the people that are already there, they already have flags planted, they're going to be way more entrenched because it's going to be harder to get there.
100%.
Yeah, all the cool stuff is in nullsec too. Like, I don't want to sound biased, but all the good money stuff is in nullsec. It's got the best ores, it's got the chance at the better anomalies and stuff like that. So there's a huge financial incentive for you to be out there. And one of the cool things about Echoes compared to Eve is there are way more people playing Echoes, which kind of, as an Eve player, makes me a little sad, but also hopeful, because maybe some of these guys will come over. But every system, it feels like it's packed, right? You can't go someplace and just be alone to just farm by yourself. There's going to be other people in there. And one of the most jarring things for me about Echoes compared to Eve is in Eve, we have a thing called the directional scanner. So you can pull it up and you can see people, anything in space within 14 astronomical units from you, which is pretty huge thing. So when someone comes in the local, I can click on it and I can probably get a glimpse of what ship they're in. If they're in a venture, I can keep running my anomalies. I don't care too much. I don't think they're going to be a target for me. But if they're in something like a Condor or anything like that, or in a PvP ship, then I'm like, oh shit, I probably got to run and get safe. But in Echoes, there's no, and I don't know if this is ever going to come, right? But there's no little thing to see other spots of what's in space.
Oh man, that sounds so foreign to me, because I'm just thinking like that would be that's a very powerful kind of feature to be able to see where people are kind of coming in or where they're going. I think it'll be interesting if they introduce those things, but right now it kind of feels like I find it like cool that we don't know where people are. We don't have a Z-kill board, so there's a lot of info we don't have, and it's been interesting to see how players are looking to crowdsource all of this data.
Yeah, stuff in Echoes, it feels very much more uncertain and kind of exciting. Like, it's exciting to be in space. Yeah, because I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know if these 40 other people in local are going to gang up on me, or if they're going to let me just travel through in peace.
I think someone one of my discords said that Eve Echoes to them is the better version of the classic WoW, right? And I think they actually stole it because they linked a Talking in Station video from Talking in Station. But what they were saying is it has everything that I love about Echoes, but the formula is changed up just enough where I don't 100% sure know if I'm doing it right. And that's what makes them want to come back. Like, even if they put it down for a week, and then they're like, oh, I'm bored. What am I going to do to kill 20 minutes? Oh, I'm going to go mine. Right? Or whatever it is. They can just pick it up and put it down. But the beauty part is there's those little subtle differences, and they don't feel like everything's already been discovered.
There's
I
a
mean,
little sense of
with all your
discovery.
expertise, I mean, was that kind of what helped draw you into Echoes? Just
Yeah, for sure, right? Because I played Eve in the very early days, and Echoes in the very early days. It was like the same thing, but with the fast forward button on, right? So in Eve, it took me, I think, a month to go from a frigate to a cruiser. In Echoes, it took me 3 days, but I still felt that same sense of accomplishment. Like, oh shit, this is cool. I'm finally getting into a bigger ship, and I don't know exactly what's gonna happen next. Like, I don't know, like what these anomalies are gonna be like. I don't know how these NPCs are gonna affect me. So I still have to be like really careful and cautious.
Has anyone PvP'd against you, and have you lost a ship?
I have not yet lost a ship to PvP. Some people have tried, but I do feel like I do have a bit of an unfair advantage because I kind of know a lot of the mechanics of how it works. So I was out in a Vexer, and I was just doing some anomalies in Fountain. Some guy in another Vexer came up next to me, and I killed his drones while he was trying to kill me. And there's no, right now in Echoes, there's no way to see that your drones are dying unless you lock them up yourself. So this guy, he lost all of his drones, and he had no idea that he had lost his drones. So he was doing no damage to me. So I just shot him until he eventually had to warp off. But he lost like 50 million drones because
No.
medium drones are so giga expensive now.
Yeah, I definitely think the market is still seems like pretty unstable in terms of pricing. Sometimes I look and I have no idea why certain things are priced. I know Planetary Interaction when I was playing the beta, I was like, ooh, I can't wait to get rich. I'm gonna sell some Planetary Interaction, get some rare stuff up there, and then it kind of seemed like the market was pretty saturated. NavyMan, you were telling me a little bit about that earlier on terms of Planetary Interaction and what was going on with the market. Do you want to share?
Yeah, so it actually came from a video I got to see by, again, Sovereign RPG, right? He did a 3-minute little clip, and he just had like a little blurb in there. It said, hey, there was this bot heist. I'm like, I like those kind of stories. Do a little bit of research, ask a couple questions. And I pinged him saying, hey, if you want, give me a little more information. And unfortunately, he hadn't gotten to me yet. So I reached out to a couple people, and they're like, oh, yeah, so here is the PR spin version that I got. An alliance said, hey, we have suspect that these people are bots, and we will protect them while they're doing all their planetary interaction, and so that they could cap out at like 600 or something cubics worth of materials, right? And then whenever they're ready to call the herd of all the planets, they'll protect them again while they go collect them. And so instead, when the guys were going out there, they just blocked them, right? And then stole all the goods. Something like 17 billion ISK of planetary goods were introduced to the market in the last week and a half because of this like massive bot farm heist, as it's being kind of called. And it wows me that there's that many bots, unfortunately, right? But that the players were like, well, if we can't beat the bots, let's use the bots. But that's something very Eve, right? That's like meta on the meta. Like, okay, we know they're going to be a thing. Let's pretend we're going to protect them and then backstab them, right?
Yeah. The funniest thing is that actually happened in Eve with like in 2006 or so. There was a group of just botters that would do NPC stuff, not PI stuff, and another group, a PvP group that was notorious for like just being mercenaries, said, "Hey, we'll invite you over to this area of space. It's super safe, I promise." So all these bots came over to this space, and they made just tons of money. And as they were moving out, they were like, hey, this place is really dangerous, the PvPer said to the bots. This is really dangerous. Let's protect you. And as they jumped the gate, they just killed them all at the same time and just took everything they were working for and just looted that. And so it's quite funny to see that happen in a similar universe, but so quickly.
It's like old tricks are new again, right? I want
Yeah.
Rooks and Kings to show up with smart bombs and just like do their thing.
I think that is really cool, and I think for a lot of Eve vets who are nervous about whether this would be an authentic Eve experience, seeing those kinds of things definitely gives a testament to how authentic the experience is going to be. When did that happen for the bot experience in Eve Online? How long did that take to happen?
That happened around 2006 or so, and the game kind of started in 2003. So you're talking 3 to 4 years before that happened, really on a big scale. So when I talk about how Echoes feels like early Eve on the fast forward button, you kind of get a sense of what I mean.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, 1 week from 4 to 6 years. And I will think it'll be interesting to see how wars happen, and if that will also have the fast forward button when it comes to wars. And with sovereignty coming, a lot of players are kind of gearing up or getting ready for that. Do you guys have any advice as we prepare in a fast forward motion towards sovereignty? Any advice for people on how they can prepare their teams?
I think this is gonna be all Elise. My null is mostly wormholes and occasionally poking out and shooting at the locals, or having them have us go chase some non-locals around. So,
I have no idea.
Sov?
Pardon?
I don't know what the Sov system is going to be like, right? I have absolutely no idea. Like, this is where the difference between Eve and Eve Echoes really comes into play for me. I don't know how people are going to interact. I don't know what Sov is going to do for people. I don't know how they're going to fight their wars. I'd say the one rule that you can always do in Eve when you're going into a time of uncertainty is to make sure you have a nice little nest egg that you can rely on, either in terms of ships or materials to build those ships.
Good. So having some materials come in. Don't go dry on your stock. Make sure that you have a little stockpile.
Yeah,
have war
people are gonna start when battle cruisers are coming out. People are hitting tier 7 in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and battle cruisers are going to come out. That's going to be a big moment for the mineral market, right? So everyone's going to try and jump into those things, and those things aren't cheap in terms of minerals that you'll need. So there's going to be probably a little bit of a shortage there. So store up, get a little bit of nest egg going.
And we can use.
Yeah, I have one person that just sent me a thing, and their allowable share formula is they're going to check the first month of losses because they're doing PvP, and then they're going to quadruple that and aim that as their ship repository for war. So they have what they would consider a 2-month high intensity war chest. I think that's not a bad thing. I mean, Eve is all about numbers, and someone's going to crunch it. There's going to be a bean counter that will be the guy that saves the day in the end, right? Who's like, we were 1 ISK away from going broke, but it's because we did that extra decimal place, we didn't go broke.
Now, it seems interesting because Sovereign just mentioned that there's already been a few big battles. He said yesterday there's been a 200-plus player battle, and then a few days before that, a 300-plus battle. That's pretty exciting. That's interesting. I mean, I haven't heard too much. I'd love to know which teams those were.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad that we didn't get a battle report or Eve Echoes, the devs just stealing the analytics and going, guys, look, there's huge battles.
That's so cool.
Because
I have no idea what they would even
push me to go to null at that point, right?
I don't even know what they would fight over. That's so funny.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like we're not in Sov yet, guys, but hey, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of politics. I would say before this game launched, teams, there were already alliances. I would almost consider borderline coalitions that had formed prior to people entering into the game. So I feel like politics are pretty high, and people are kind of all trying to figure out who everyone is and what's their game, and now is really going to be a time that I think people start really allying up or choose who their friends are.
What's really shocked me so far in Echoes is just to see how much these big organized groups or how effective these guys are at making money. As just by myself or with one other person, my little goal was to hit 1 billion ISK, and I'm close to it. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm really close. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of hot shit here. I got 1 billion ISK in Echoes in the first 3 weeks or in the first month, and then I see people oh, I've earned so much ISK that I can just buy anything I want. I've bought me and my alts a year of playtime each already. the amount of money that these guys have figured out how to make is just astounding. And I think that's probably more of a bonus, not from Eve knowledge, but from just playing the Eve Echoes beta and stuff. They kind of know they have a nice upper hand there.
Oh, 100%. And Sovereign just made a comment. It was Trimark versus OpForce, and then Golden Horde versus multiple, I'm assuming he means multiple alliances. And he said really they're fighting over system control, so staking their claim over on LowSec and just trying to claim around the system. Man, I mean, all these people having battles. I've just been chilling. I've just been chilling with my team, doing some PvE, doing some 200 mil mission book stories.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't even gotten to storylines yet, to be honest. Like, I'm kind of just mining. Like, one of my friends gave me a Venture 2 and said, hey, here's a blueprint for a 3. Go mine the stuff. I'm like, okay, so I do the mining, I do the coding, do some mining, some coding. But, yeah, I just do, like, level 5s. And every time I come into a local that only has a level 1 base, I criticize everyone. I'm like, don't kill the bases. Come on, we want the scouts.
That is a great point to bring up, and I think we had touched on it a little bit earlier. Bases, why don't we kill them? Why do players need to stop killing the bases?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least it makes up 50% of a system's anomalies when it spawns, right?
So the way I understand it, and they've kind of borrowed a little bit from Eve on this, like the difficulty, like the higher the base, the more that, okay, let me get back to 0. The base will spawn new anomalies based on the level of the base, right? So that's like large anomalies, medium and small, and then the more difficult ones or the more rare ones, like scouts, where you get invention materials, inquisitors, where you get rig blueprints and stuff like that, and then the dead space anomalies, where you'll get the C-type loot and stuff like that. That's all spawned based on the base of the system. So the higher the base, the more that those things are going to kind of chain up, or the better that they'll be when they chain up, right? So if your goal is to, say, farm medium drone blueprints, you'll want to go to a system that has a base 6 or higher, and you'll just do all the basic systems until a scout comes up. You go in there, you loot your drone blueprint, and you go back to Jita and cat with all the money in your hands, right? That's what you're going to want to do. But the higher the base, the more difficult and rewarding that the anomalies will spawn. You did mention that there will be some random ones that do spawn, right? So there'll be some 2s and 3s and maybe some 8s and 9s in there. But those won't respawn the same way they'll do when the base is present. So when you kill the base, you essentially destroy the value of the system, right? So I could see where this is probably what people will do when they're fighting over territory, especially in nullsec. They'll say, hey, where are these guys farming all of their stuff? Let's go kill their base and reset all their progress. That's a week for it to go from 1 to 6 or even higher. And really, you don't want to be doing anything under 6s, right? Because where you make the money is through 6s and higher.
Yeah, I'm in a couple of Discords because like I'm trying to collect a lot of feedback, and people in different corps invite me in there. And 2 corps, their very first rule on their welcome channel says, you kill a base, or you're found in a base, you are no longer blue, right? Like, that is their top message. Well, okay, what, guys, tell me what bases are. You know, what do I need to not do about them? Because I used to go kill them. I was in high sec. I was like, oh, you like a base 1 in high sec, you don't even need a destroyer to clear. It's that bad.
And I do think that's important to notice that maybe a lot of newer players don't understand the difference between different types of anomalies. For me, I was understanding, anomalies like, we've got a dead side or a scout, and those are exciting because they drop better loot. So understanding that as a new player who might not understand different anomalies drop different loot, they're going to have elites. And that's going to be better for you. It might be a little bit harder, but you're going to get better items in return. You're going to get better loot. So, but that's really good to know. Players, stop killing the bases. Seriously.
Yeah.
We've definitely had some people kind of come in and swoop in and try to steal, kill our bases. I think there was one player who, oh man, poor guy, lost everything he had. I think he had 400, maybe almost a bill worth of items in his cargo, and he was begging in local, please don't kill me, I didn't know. And we were like, never come back here. blew him up.
You got to learn your lesson somehow, right?
Gotta learn the lesson. Hopefully he didn't quit, but I think it's better to lose your ships early on than later because you learn the value, you learn what not to do, and yeah, it's definitely not a great idea to go around in nullsec with uh, a billion amount of ISK in your cargo, just wandering around. But well,
At least I had Fish. Can I ask at least one question?
yeah,
Because you've
of
had
course.
so much more time in Eve. The Plex market in Echoes. So I could record in the app, right? I bought one Plex every single day on one particular account, so I kind of have like a way to track it because there isn't any market history. What do you see with Plexes? And on top of that, the chips. Like for new people that are right at the end of this thing, talk to them about what the chips and Plexes are, so that they can see what an Eve veteran really knows.
So the chips, they're essentially just for Eve players, they're implants, they're learning skills, they're things that make you train faster. So it's kind of you have to. I'm not saying you have to get it, but if you plan to play for more than 2 or 3 months, you absolutely should get those neuroscience chips. There's three. You can only get one of each. They're going to just keep going up in price because they're going to be kind of required, right? If you want to stay competitive, it's how you're going to get to the next tier level faster. It's how you're going to learn those next skills to have your guns do like 5% more damage. Hugely important. The reason they'll keep going up in price, I mean, I thought they're probably stable right now around 100 mil. Last I checked, for the big one.
100
But the
mil.
reason they're going to go up in price is okay. They're up to 130. So they were yesterday they were 100. Today they're 130.
Jesus.
Is because people are going to learn how to make money, right? So it's a time investment type thing rather than an ISK investment. So grinding for 5 hours, if I can make 10 mil an hour, then these chips are worth 13 hours of my time. Once I can make 20 mil an hour, these chips are only worth 6 hours of my time, right? So it's going to go based on your time. As these high-end players can earn more ISK, or as people can earn more ISK doing certain activities with bigger ships, then the prices will continue to go up because it's a representation of the time they spent, not necessarily the ISK that they earned. Same with Plex, right? Early on, and this is where I was really grateful for my Eve knowledge. I kind of recognized that the Plex prices are really going to go up. So I think they were, when I bought a year's worth using in-game funds, I think they were at 30 to 35K. I went super broke. I spent every cent I had. I didn't even get the Navy Vexor that I wanted. I just stayed in my shitty normal Vexor. It's like I'm putting all of my money into the Plex because they're only going to go up and up and up, especially because players got 80 for free, more or less. So they're going to want to sell that to get into the next ship. But that's definitely going to be marked not necessarily on the value of ISK, but the value of your time to earn like the 500 Plex.
See, I
So
I remember when Plex first came out. I think it was 8,000 per Plex, because people just wanted to make a quick for the amount that you had to buy. I think they just needed 3 mil to start a corp, so they would just basically put it on the market to get as quick to make a corp. Man, regrets. I wish I knew that.
yeah, I mean, if you have, so right now there's not much you can do with your money, especially if you're the type of person that just kind of like me, like you'll casually run storylines or something, or just run encounters. You might say like, well, I can't buy a bigger ship yet. I've got a replacement for my ship if and when it dies. What am I going to do? You can just invest in Plex because it's going to go up, right? Like it's not a matter of if it is, it's just a matter of how high it will go, right? It will eventually hit a plateau, but I think we're nowhere near close to where that is yet.
100%. Now, I did have, not to jump back, but I did have a comment from one of our viewers who was asking about if we could speak to base leveling mechanics, and just the chances for leveling a base. If you could, do you want to dive into that a little bit?
So I'm not 100% sure. I've just kind of been fidgeting with it. I'm pretty sure that the bases only go up on a function of time, not a function of how many of the sites you've cleared. And I could be horribly wrong on that. But when it comes to chaining the systems, which is probably an Eve term, it's essentially like clearing out the sites that are same level as the base. There's a chance that it'll spawn a scout, an inquisitor, or a dead space one. and I think it's something like 10% for a scout or inquisitor, and then a 1% for a dead space spawn. So those things are super rare. In terms of leveling the base, I thought it was time based. I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. Again, this is not a thing that really exists in Eve so much, but the closest similar, like the most similar mechanic in Eve, it's a function of how much you've done in the system, like how many NPCs you have killed, combined with the amount of time that the base has been in there.
100%.
So I have a little bit of insight, and I don't know if this is correct, but it's been passed to me to pass on to this video, stating that bases have a set amount of time that they will level up, and then above one gate connection for every jump in there during that level up time, an unknown amount of time is reduced. And then if you clear all the top tier content, that's another like activation point to it, right? So there is a sliding scale. So someone is saying that if you have a 3 to 4 gate system, they have seen bases level up within 24 hours, probably due to traffic. And then others have seen dead end systems where it took almost 3 days for it to go from a 1 to a 2. And they said that they might be partially responsible for it because they weren't clearing all the anomalies and they weren't jumping the gates. I figure personally, as an E player, if it's a gate mechanic thing, I see an army of ults going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, reducing it down to 24 hours every single time. But that would be an interesting kind of other metagame, right? Because it would kind of make sense if they were trying to be a lore-based thing. More traffic through a system would invite more pirates, right? Because more opportunity would be there. And I hope some of these things stay secret.
I definitely think there's
players will figure it out.
Yeah,
they'll break it down.
I definitely think there's still a level of discovery. I know that a lot of people have kind of been trying to discover or figure out how exactly we can level the bases and whatnot. So this might be something we can do on a follow-up stream as we continue to do more investigation and find out a little bit more of the tips and tricks. I do kind of think, there's going to be some secrets, that people are going to start discovering things here and there, and then they'll slowly get, released. So it'll be interesting to see which teams start really figuring things out and are able to start turning and burning those so they can level them up. But NavyMan, if you can just, would you be able to post in the link of your app just one more time? I thought I had it in the description, but just in case for anyone who is interested to download it, feel free to post it in there. Would love to get some more tools integrated in there. And anyone who has any suggestions or wants their news featured on his app, please feel free to contact him. But I think we are going to be wrapping up for today. And I'll let you guys get off because it's time. I got to do some storybook missions with the team. With my afterburners, because it's PvE, not PvP. Man, I do feel like you do have to almost edit. I feel like I could have a whole fleet up just based on, all right, guys, we're all going to fit our ships today, and that's it.
Yeah, it is very much an art form for Eve, and it's its own beast in Echoes as well. There's so many things that are different.
Now, Sovereign just mentioned that it has nothing to do with traffic. Maybe it's possible I might see if Sovereign wants to join as a guest for next week, and then he can kind of dive into the base and tell everyone what he's learned so far, or link in a video if he's had any videos on this. So I do think this is a big point that a lot of people want to learn about.
Yeah, I mean, I was just passing along something that got passed to me, and they're usually fairly credible on their sources. So
100%. All right, now let's get this app linked in here. So for anybody who wants to check out his app, feel free. It is an Android. It's Android. What about iOS, by the way? Are you gonna make the app for iOS?
Depending on the following that it comes up with, and if I get the features built right, it's all about figuring out what the daily drivers are. Like I said, if there's a large group of people that start using the tools for industrial or ship fitting and testing, then it'll have a niche to be able to port over. Until then, I don't want, like iOS, you don't go to until you're ready. Android is more experimental. You can do a lot of things, right? I'm very fast building new features because I know the platform very well. So I'd rather experiment here and trip quite a bit and whenever I go over to iOS, have a really well thought out app. Plus, NetEase hasn't really published their developer agreement the same way CCP has, and so Apple is very heavy on their enforcement of third-party infringement, and so I want to make sure that the rules are clear before I go over there.
That makes sense. Always want to make sure you're following the rules, right? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you guys for tuning in, Capsuleers. If you guys need any advice or feedback or want to get some more insight from some of these players, you can join the Talking in Stations Discord. I'm always happy to help players, whether they're interested in EVE Online or EVE Echoes. We're really trying to help bridge these communities and just get more people involved in the world of New Eden. All right. Thanks, and have a good one.
Bye.